I'm John Boorman. I'm the writer of Domestic Robots.
My name is Brendan Gleeson.
My name is Stephen Rea. I'm playing a character called Sean.
The part I play is Rob, the domestic robot. Yeah, that's the part I play. Yes.
The idea came really when I was thinking about the future, thinking about my children, the world they'll be living in, problems of overpopulation, of climate change. And I figured out what really would be needed to make this planet livable in. And I thought about robots would certainly be part of it. And I discovered that what we would need in Ireland is a visionary statesman to put in effect the things that need to be done.
Sean is a man living in this new world of robots, but he's pretty suspicious of the robots. He's recently been employed. Now he hasn't got a job, and I think he mistrusts the robots. And I think he's right.
Overpopulation is obviously the most pressing of these problems. And so one of the things that I suggest this visionary statesman does is to go along with the other countries of the world where they agree to reduce their populations. So you have to get permission to have a child.
Yeah, I think it's quite an optimistic look at the future. It's 2068, 50 years from now. And basically money has disappeared, a lot of things have disappeared, and people have the opportunity to follow their every desire. So finding a sense of purpose and finding the ability to be contented within that is proving elusive.
Well, I didn't get into eugenics or the notion, the Hitler notion of breeding healthy people and not allowing unhealthy people to breed. That is anti-democratic. So the penalty for having a child is that your life expectancy is reduced. And so you really need to want one if you're prepared to die younger.
John Boorman's writing always has a metaphysical element to it. It's always referring to the nature of who we are and our foibles, but it's always so light of touch. There's a lot of love in it. But there's also a lot of observational comedy that's very wry, very kind of understated and kind of wicked. So it's always a pure joy and a total honour to work on his material.
Well, he shouts at him a lot, and the robot shouts back, which is a bit much, really. I mean, the others seem to be kind of to adore their robot, don't they? But, he doesn't like it.
I suggest that everyone will live to 120 by taking this life extension program. But if you have a child, your life expectancy is reduced. In other words, made rather normal, 70, 80. So you make a sacrifice in order to have a child.
That's what dictates. If you can find the good writing, that's where you go, right? The rest of it really doesn't come into it an awful lot. It's very difficult to actually get writing at the calibre. Like, I've been very lucky to being allowed to tackle some extraordinary writers' material. So I feel very lucky about it. I know I'm very lucky. And that's always what you're in search of, for the next piece of writing that will excite you and bring you into a place that you would never have gone before.
Well, it's always about the writing, isn't it? I mean, as Brendan says, that's the starting point, and of course, when you read a play, like, say, David Ireland's play, Cyprus Avenue, you know instantly that unless he has a nervous breakdown by page 14, that this is a great play, and it would continue to be a great play. I think it's one of the best plays I've ever been in, and it's the same with this. So, there's no good comparing one medium with another. It's just been a total pleasure to be in a radio studio doing this play, and even the size of the role, it doesn't matter. It's because everything your character is perfectly placed in the play. With good writers, that's the way it is, and. So, but it is always the writing. I don't know if that's true so much in America, because I think films are made often are put together by committee, aren't they? But we still here have a kind of belief in the text.
Well, of course, these are very serious issues, and I'm only really capable of writing comedy. So the play is a comedy, but it touches on all these issues. So I hope it's enjoyable to listen to, but perhaps you think a little bit more about them after you've heard it.
Well, we had Freelan Heaney and Tom Paulin and Tom Kilroy, and I mean, this week, I'm doing this play, John Boorman. Then I'm going to Kilkenny and reading from The Big Chapel by Tom Kilroy, and then I'm reading New York Time by Derek Mahan. It's what an incredible week, isn't it? It's not what people would say, oh, the glamour. It's just brilliant what those writers do for your imagination.
You just know. When you're into it that you're not second guessing it. You're not. Usually, what I find is that I'm just hoping it doesn't collapse, because there's a kind of a building excitement when you see something that just has a certain quality, but it's always recognisable almost immediately.
The great thing, say, about David Ireland or Brian Friel or any great writer is that they do something for the medium that they're writing for. On the one hand, I'm saying the medium doesn't matter, but at the same time, David Ireland is actually plunging theatre into new areas, so that you don't know whether you're shocked by the content or by the method, and that's kind of thrilling.
Well, I always go through a number of drafts and allow the characters to suggest how the thing should progress. So I do 5, 6, I think this is the 7th draft that we're working on. And I try to make it better each time, and crisper and more and funnier. When you get to the later drafts, that's when you kill your darlings. You cut out all the things you're really proud of having written in order to make it clearer and stronger.
I mean, absolutely. I do think that there's got to be a little bit less. I think in somewhere, particularly like RTE, somewhere like that, there's got to be a little less ego involved in what is given access. In other words, there's always a kind of a slight feeling of too many tiers, not particularly in RTE, but across the board with that kind of hands-on production where there has to be an artistic input from. Whereas, particularly with younger writers, the only way they're going to flourish is by making mistakes. And I think particularly in Ireland, people listen an awful lot, and people are really interested in stories and drama, and we keep telling ourselves this all the time. So the thing to do is just give them access that's kind of unfettered, which is not to say that you abandon them to their fate. It just means that you give them every support necessary that you can, but don't try to kind of colour their artistic vision in them. And I think that's how to keep a kind of freshness going on. All the great movements come from making mistakes initially. And I just think that the more access, it's really about access and pouring resources behind some of the younger people coming through and taking an experiment. I mean, there is great work being done, but just opening out the access and then kind of hands off, other than to support, and it's easier said than done. But I think we're always producing people in this country, always, and the big thing that gets in the way a lot of the time is just the bureaucracy of actually getting stuff made.
I don't know, you just have to trust the relationship between the actor and the writer. Sometimes there's interventions that I'm not fully in favour of, producers who aren't, artistic directors,
Brendan Gleeson and Stephen Rea have been in all my radio plays, and I certainly wanted them to be in this one. When Brendan read the play, he immediately said he'd like to play the robot. And I was a bit surprised at that. But when I talked to him about it, and we played around with voices and ideas, and it became possible. And he's magnificent in this role. He really holds the whole thing together, really, because he's playing a character that has no emotion. And Brendan is a very emotional man. And he's able to do that. It's an extraordinary act of acting. And Stephen has a wonderful delivery. I'm very lucky to get these actors, and also the whole cast, brilliant actors. I'm very lucky to have them.
I think you need to be canny about money. If you're going to put in a lot of production value in terms of you're going to spend a lot of money on cameras and all that, and lights and all sorts of things, then you have to have an international dimension. It's very difficult to do that with the kind of pool that we have here to pay for it. On the other hand, if you're going to be inventive in the way that you present stuff. I've often wondered why they don't go back to the 50s where they presented live plays, for example, and the electricity was in the fact that they were live on TV, and I don't understand why that can't be done for practically no money here. So I do think sometimes the money is a little bit of an excuse to do very little. When we started with the Patch Machine, I always remember Paul Mercier, and you did a black box theatre with a table and 4 chairs, and that's all. That was it. So I do think sometimes money is used as an excuse. Be canny if you're going to do it with all the bells and whistles, but otherwise I think we can do an awful lot of inventive stuff without the massive budgets.
You've got to rely on the actors and the writers. That's what I believe, and sometimes concepts intercept energy, I think, and that's what works. My God, to work with David Ireland gave me a new lease of life in terms of what I could attempt, because he's offering you stuff that you haven't really seen before. And that's where you want to get to. But, it is magic. How does that happen? I mean, the Abbey took his play, but they made it happen, but they didn't make him a writer. He was already a writer, I don't know. It is mysterious how the great arts are mysterious, aren't they?
Well, of course, if you're making a movie, it takes at least 2 years between the writing and the conception and getting the money and getting the cast and putting it together. And most film scripts don't get made for one reason or another, because there are many reasons why a film should not be made, and you have to be up against them. Radio is so much more immediate. The writing can be converted into action so much quicker, and it has much more dynamic, really, as a result of that. And I find it extremely enjoyable. I started out in radio, really, for the BBC when I was 18, 17, doing live radio. At that time, it was even before the magnetic tape. I used to go out and do interviews, cutting a disc and watching that lacquer spiralling off the disc as we recorded it. So there you are. Go back a long way.
Essentially, it comes down, though, to the material and the performance, and the connection that the performance can make between the writer and the audience. And the medium then is part of that communication. That's all it needs to be. If the central sort of creative forces are the writers, the performers, and then the audience, and the audience, you want to get an audience, obviously, because there's nothing without it. But I think you can do an awful lot by just allowing things to happen. And access is the huge thing. Give the youngsters especially, and the people who have been doing it for years, just give them access.
Well, Lee Marvin was a marvellous film actor, technically brilliant, and I learned a lot from him. He was also very supportive of me when I was making Point Blank in 1967. When I'd met him in London, and we'd spent many hours talking about this possibility, and there was a script which both of us were given, and when we met, Lee said to me, "What do you think of this script?" I said, "It's terrible." He said, "Well, I agree. What are we talking about?" I said, "The character." And we then talked and worked on it, and finally, in his apartment in London, he was making The Dirty Dozen at the time, and he took the script, and he said, "I'll do it with you on one condition." And he threw the script out of the window, which was his typical Marvin gesture. So we did. I did that. I rewrote the whole thing. And when I went to Los Angeles, he called a meeting with the head of the studio and the producers, and he reminded them that he had script approval and cast approval, and they agreed he did, and his contract, he just won the Academy Award. And he said, "I defer those approvals to John." And he turned on his heel and walked out. And I had 4 men glaring angrily at me. This young director had complete control over the film, and they had none. I mean, he realized more than I did that making a film as daring as this was something you wouldn't get away with in Hollywood unless you had a strong backing.
Well, I think we have to take responsibility for, self-examination on the national station. And I think we have to be honest about it. There was a while when drama was practically, out the door, and a lot of that had to do with really not wishing to look at who we were, and we suffered because of that. And I think it's part of the remit is that we have a certain self-examination going on, a certain exploration of where and who we are and all that. And so I think the arts are part of that conversation, a very vital part of it. And, we shouldn't look on it as a duty so much as a gift. I think everybody benefits from it.
Stanley Kubrick, I could say, under normal circumstances, I could say he was a great friend of mine. I'm not sure that I was a great friend of his. We talked a great deal about everything, and he was extremely knowledgeable, and he questioned everything. That was a great thing about Stanley. He questions everything. For instance, he said to me one day, "Do you still write your scripts in a conventional way? It always puts you on a back foot, I said, "Well, I suppose I do, yes." He said, "Well, with the dialogue narrow and the directions wide." I said, "Yes, I do." He said, "Well, I do it the other way." He said, "I make the directions narrow and the dialogue wide, because the directions are much more important than the dialogue." And of course, Hitchcock used to say that when he and the writer had finished the script, they would go back and put in the dialogue, which, of course, he started in the silent era. I'm working on my funeral arrangements. That's my next project.
Sorry.
Brendan Gleeson's unmistakable laugh there, ending this week's In the Wings. You also heard the voices of Stephen Rea and John Boorman talking about John's play Domestic Robots, which is next week's Drama on One, broadcast in tribute to John as he approaches 80 years. This programme was recorded in 2018. The series producer of Drama on One is Kevin Reynolds.
Drama on One.
A lie told often enough becomes the truth.
Drama on One, Sundays at 8 p.m.
The pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity. An optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty.
RTE.ie/Drama on One.
Compassion is the basis of morality.
Drama on One.
The tongue, like a sharp knife, kills without drawing blood.
Drama on One.
I'm Stanley Townsend.
I'm Angeline Ball.
I'm Stephen Rea.
Hi, I'm Lawrence Kinlan.
Hi, I'm Saoirse Ronan.
I'm Nick Dunning.
Hi, I'm Brendan Gleeson, and you can hear me at rte.ie/Drama on One.
rte.ie/Drama on One.